It's so opportune now to move to Terrence Kommal. Now, Terrence Kommal is an extraordinary professor at Telet SA. He's focusing on practice, the practice of business, but he has a wealth of experience. He has a few ideas on how to get results in this post-pandemic environment. Terrence, thank you so much for joining us, and we'd like to hear more from you.
Thank you so much, GP. I think the learning programs and the academic innovations are indeed fascinating because of where we find ourselves at an accelerated pace post-pandemic. But to move into the presentation, and I'm going to apologize in advance, this is a 45-minute presentation that I'm going to try and squeeze into a lot shorter period at this time. So to me, before we get into some of the nuts and bolts of what the 3 R's of entrepreneurship are, where innovation and technology can fit in, maybe a little bit of the backstory. I am associated as a professor of practice at the institution, and I run a range of businesses, both in healthcare, investments, and other fields. But simply put, when it comes to innovation, business, and success, money talks and wealth whispers, because all too often we find ourselves in South Africa and internationally, where the moment somebody has a small measure of success, it is then almost flaunted to say we're making money, as opposed to building legacy and sustainable systems. Where do I plug into this world? I can tell you we've come from nothing. Literally, that little car reminds me of the car we had when we grew up. I studied on scholarships as we had no funding for accommodation to pay for fees and university studies. I was invited then at Tux at the illustrious Sonop residence and turned it down because I didn't have fees. So I joined the military because they had one of the best opportunities to study and move forward. But how does that tie into entrepreneurship? Well, when you have zero resources and the only direction you can look is up, then I made a promise to my mom back then saying, in 10 years, we will live a lifestyle where we may not have to look at prices again, but also be responsible with what we do as we gain success. It was an illustrious dream. It was a mad idea with an 18-year-old just imagining what could be and what's possible. And in terms of the business world, I started my first business in 2000 and formally registered my first business in 2003. For those of us who remember, revenue stamps were the rage. So that is at a time when innovation was slightly less prevalent than where it is today. In terms of talking about business, there's a massive difference between theorizing on how business should work and how entrepreneurship and innovation works versus somebody who actually has been down the road. And that, I think, is what we need in terms of mentorship, coaching, and support in tandem with the academic training programs which Telet SA and the institution is offering. In terms of practitioner, over the last 11 years, we've built a healthcare management system, or a platform business, as it's properly called these days. And we were averaging pre-COVID in excess of 2 billion Rand per annum, claims management, no debt financing, no revenue generated because of investor funding, and 100% equity. And that's important because a lot of young entrepreneurs and established businesses have started to feel the pressure of venture capital, private equity, and others, where success is only measured on what you've raised, not what you've generated and created in terms of value as a business. As a lifelong learner since 2001, I've always had a student number. I'm registered at some institution or the other because the speed and pace at which education, technology, and innovation is moving, one has to keep pace. But to move quickly into the first I, which I define as integrity, when you're in business and you're looking at what is the impact of technology and innovation and changes, the first change and the first perspective you need to reflect on is, why am I doing this? Why am I involved in this business initiative? Why do we persist in what we do? And what is our purpose in doing this? Or what is my purpose as an individual for doing this? Then looking at the external environment of, what do I do within my business, my friends, my family, and my direct circle of influence? Why am I doing it? And does it really matter that we run a business or we create services or goods that add value to them in that environment, not just revenue? And beyond that, what do we do for the broader society? How is what we do relevant to the real world outside of our microcosm of us and our businesses? Integrity, very simply put, is about you, family, your big why of why this is necessary, why you do it. And most importantly, what purpose does it serve in the real world? How does it add value and improve people's lives? Because as a business, you're either selling a product or goods to actually serve a purpose for others, not for yourself, but for them first. And that's how you create long-term sustainable value. In terms of business planning and funding, yes, we've got to look at purposes, be dynamic with it, be nimble and agile, look long-term and work on planning and funding, but it's got to be a dynamic, evolving process. It's not sitting down for 6 months to write this plan and then get stuck into a strategy of how you're going to implement, but just start, innovate and implement, because perceptions of businesses have changed. And I think that's critical from the education world looking out, but also when we reflect on the education world. Everything, in my view, whether we're educators, doctors, lawyers, accountants, hospitals, or fast food, everything's a commodity. You're selling a service or a product for a fee or a unit of time or both. And we've got to ask ourselves as we reflect on this, what is our differentiator? What makes us different as business leaders? What makes our offering as a business organization different from the other? Because at some point, it boils down to a unit. Ask an accountant. They don't care how important we believe we are or somebody believes they are. It boils down to a unit transaction on a balance sheet eventually. In terms of growing, again, who are you surrounded by? Who are you influenced by on a daily basis? Who are you wanting to learn from, and how much do you invest in learning from others and learning from your community, your market, your friends and family? And who has walked this journey before you? Who's been down the road that you can learn from, and who can share experiences with you? Because the reality is, as much as we want to learn, as much as what we want to postulate and theorize, who can share how it's actually done on the ground every day in the real world? The second one is on innovation. And to me, innovation, again, is not just about what technology is doing, how technology is doing it, but it's an internal journey, firstly, between you and yourself. Is technology going to actually improve what you do as a business? Is it going to improve lives? And is it going to improve efficiency on how we do things as a business? Then we go ask, after we've internalized it individually and as an organization, that do we need to innovate for innovation's sake because it sounds cool, because we've got these revolution topics and 4IR and 5IR and all these IRs, but is it relevant to us? Do we need to use innovation? And if we're using innovation, how is it relevant to what we do as a business? And most importantly, again, how does it create value for those that we serve as an organization? Then look at solutions, then look at platforms. Because if the internal mind shift and the technology innovation doesn't happen internally as an individual and as an organization, the solutions are not going to be relevant. Because if you don't understand their purpose, there's enough platforms, but they won't really be relevant to what you want to do. Again, success is not about doing different things. It's about seeing and doing things differently. In terms of the art of innovation, on a quick summary of my good colleague Guy Kawasaki, he said, talking very much to some of the message I have, is make meaning, not money. Make a mantra, not a mission. Jump to the next curve. That means always be iterating and looking what else is happening, where the changes and what's going on. And in terms of roll the dice, take a chance. You don't know if it will succeed, but if you don't start, you're not going to get anywhere. If you believe you failed in your first action, it's your first action in learning. Get up, take the experience, move on. Don't worry, be crappy. This talks to minimum viable product. Don't try to perfect the product. Just get it out. The market will tell you if it's relevant or not. And then learn from that, innovate and iterate. Every product's been the same. Whether it's buying something from automotive, to buying a product in a store, to what Facebook looked like when it originally started. Innovate, but start and start now. Let 100 flowers bloom. In my view, that's about creating value in your organization. How do you filter that into everyone in what you're doing? In terms of polarizing people, my understanding is when you polarize, it's about don't leave people indifferent in terms of what you do as an organization or business. Let them have a view. They either like it or they don't. But if you have not impacted their perspective, they won't remember you at all. And churn, baby, churn talks to keep innovating, keep iterating, and do things different. And in terms of niche thyself, be good at something. Don't be a generalist. Be really good. Be an expert in your field. Build your expertise in that. Then you can follow the next curves and do other things, but be really good. And in terms of don't let bozos grind you down, there are a lot of naysayers. There are a lot of people saying, don't do it, it won't work. But they sit on the sidelines, they theorize, they postulate, they make it an academic discussion. They're not on the field. They're not playing the game. Let them play with you, and then we can talk innovation. And in terms of if we reflect on education and its relevance right now of what we're doing for the 4IR in business, certification and graduation does not mean education. You can have all the paperwork, you can have passed all the degrees. Have you really tested what you've learned? Have you really tested what you've been taught in theory in the real world? Because that is what's the true test. Again, solutions are not found in formal education, but in implementing and challenging the status quo. In terms of diversity, we're not talking just gender diversity only. We're not talking racial diversity, but diversity of the market. Anyone and everyone can give you feedback. How often are you looking at engagement, looking at customer engagements? How often are you talking to your clients, potential clients, and people who are not your clients to understand what are their needs and wants? Because people do business with people. They don't do business with products and services. They buy products and services to serve a purpose, to solve a problem, but they do business with people. They find solutions with people. And finally, in terms of the third I, we're talking about impact and relevance. What are you doing as a business to impact the social and sustainable needs of the world? Because if the reality is we can talk technology, we can talk innovation. If we're not talking to one of the key goals that the United Nations has commonly called the 17 goals of sustainable development, then you're not relevant to being good business, for being a business, for a purposeful business and relevant to what the world needs. We need to focus on how can we make people's lives better? And whether it's reducing poverty or reducing hunger by creating opportunity in your own business and organization for your staff and their family, and then the broader communities, or as looking at a macro system of how do we do business as a platform to change perspectives whilst we provide a service. In terms of governance, how do we run our businesses? Is there an independent oversight? Is there insight and perspective of saying, we're not just here for the bottom line. We're not just here for profiteering. Like BlackRock and some of the biggest investors in the world have said, if you don't have a green focus on your ESG, your environmental, social, and governance, then you're not really focusing on your relevance as a good corporate citizen. You need to look at how do you make money as a business, but how is that money you derive and your service and value you create relevant to the rest of the world that's really struggling? And COVID has clearly demonstrated the inequalities that we have in South Africa, Africa, and the world. Impact and business must be good for community. It must create value. And as Professor Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, has said, it must be about stakeholder capitalism. That's not shareholders, that's stakeholders. Anyone that's affected and effected by what you do has an input in what you do. Their capitalism and their value is an input in what you do as an organization, because you need to align with their needs and larger society, and then look at alignment with other businesses and what we're doing to be impactful and relevant. You can align with larger corporates. Don't just talk ESG. Don't just talk relevance and impact and sustainability because it's really good in an annual report, whether you're a small business or a medium to larger enterprise, but focus on real relevance. And in summary, this is how I judge what I do in an everyday, and I hope you do too. What will my kids remember about what I do and why I do it? My kids are young, but again, what is the relevance? What is the relevance of what we do as businesses, organizations, and institutions to making lives better every day? I thank you.
Thank you so much, Terrence. Really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, and Terrence is available with Verona and Leone now for your comments. You're more than welcome to post any comments in the comment section here on the YouTube channel that we're broadcasting from. We are live, so we'll do our best to answer your questions as we progress. Now, you've heard about the 3 I's, integrity and innovation and impact. It's all very important and it's all good and well. It's a wonderful presentation. It's all part of the work that we see Telit SA is getting aligned with. And Verona, if I can start with you, this is the sort of topic and the sort of things that you within Telit SA provide study supervision in. This is what you help businesses with. I'm always concerned about that first step. You know, getting beyond, yes, I'm thinking of it, I know it all makes sense, so my business can benefit from this, but now I, as the business owner, need to empower myself with some of this knowledge and the post-knowledge era that we find ourselves in. What would your advice be with regard to that first step? What should a business owner do now? Now they've listened to you and the other two. What's that first step that they need to take?
I think that first step is actually, look at your business holistically and look at strategically how you see your business in the future and how you will go about that. Because it's great to have a lot of these wonderful things, Terrence, but I think, when we start, we have to think big and have the big picture in place first. And once you have a plan or strategic drive to where you position yourself, how you see yourself, and as Terrence say, the 3 I's, those 3 I's you incorporate in the action steps once you have a strategic focus. And once you know what you need to do, you will get the tools, as any mechanic or a person that wants to build something, you gather these tools together to make your, it marketable, to grow. And also, as Terrence say, why do I do what I do? You have to, and also in terms of growth, and I think for any businesses, you have to grow, and not just grow in terms of monetary value, but I think grow in terms of how you also address these sustainable development goals, in terms of the broader society. And what we try to do is actually, not those aspects together, and take the different, fruits in the basket and bring it together and try to actually merge those things together. And that's why there's a close synergy between the work that Leonie does, the work that Terrence does, in the broader business environment, and how we as a research unit does not just focus on theory, but actually bringing the praxis, to the space, to the business space, and to the community out there, and responding to the needs of the society. Thank you.
Verona, thank you. And Terrence, listening to Verona and keeping in mind what you said, I get the idea we're thinking too small. I don't know if I'm just being inspired now or what, but it feels as if we get too stuck into our everyday lives, and we're missing some of the bigger picture.
I agree, GP. One of the biggest things for me, and I'll share a quick anecdote with it, is I actually got involved full-time in the platform or healthcare business as a system across the country, because I had reported in my previous career to a colonel who, every time I took a new suggestion of how to improve things in the healthcare system, he would sit back and say, Terrence, it's not your job to change the system. Just leave it alone. It works. And one day he eventually said, if you think you know better, go do it. And I resigned 30 days later. We met 10 years eventually in Parliament and other environments, where he said, so how are things going? I said, well, you're still employed by the state. We serve the state in a range of businesses across the country with work linking to the continent. And that's about being relevant. You've got to have courage. It may not work the first time. I've been involved in no less than 10 to 15 different business initiatives. But what you take from it is build relationships, build networks, try and understand what the market needs, and iterate as you go along. But most importantly, just get started. You learn along the way. You can theorize as much as you want. You can learn along the way from case studies and experience and coaching and support. But if you never really get down to doing it, it's almost like trying to say you're building muscle, reading magazines on gymming. Just start training. Start doing it, and you'll figure it along the way. You will make mistakes, like you do have a painful morning after you've done too many sit-ups on one given day. But get started. learn the lessons, but keep moving. That momentum and that courage to start is where success actually begins.
Leonie, thank you, Terrence. Leonie, Terrence made me think now when he said, he asked a few questions and made a few proposals to the Colonel. I'm immediately going to women in entrepreneurship and women entrepreneurs, and I'm getting that same vibe there. There are a few people having to challenge the system in that environment, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We've been working with female entrepreneurs. So I've been working with them in different capacities, and when I was running an incubator, and with the Enterprising Women program that we've been running, I think, for 9 years. You constantly have women that just want to keep doing the same thing, be the Me Too kind of organization, Me Too kind of services, and we constantly have to say to them, you have to think broader than that, bigger than that. If you're going to get a footprint on the market, you have to find that gap. You have to find what is your unique selling proposition. What are you bringing that nobody else is bringing? As Terrence said, you don't necessarily do different things, because people think, if I can't offer something different, then what am I supposed to do? Just do it differently. Don't do it the same way as the person next to you is doing it. There are many different ways to skin a cat, if we want to use that analogy. Just, and as Terrence said, just go for it and do it differently. And if you fail, failure is not a bad thing. It's school fees. That's how you learn to do things differently next time. And every single time, and I'm pretty sure, people like Terrence and many of my colleagues and so on, we've had businesses that, hey, it didn't quite go the way we anticipated, but next time we know better, because we learned our lesson from that, and we've walked away and we've taken something from the scenario. So yeah, it is always about, trying to encourage people to think wider. And again, as Terrence said, be courageous. Just take the bull by the horn and say, I'm going to do it. If it doesn't work out, so what?
Terrence, on being courageous, what I also see is there's a bit of a fear factor, a hesitancy when it comes to new technology. Many people are it's so new that they actually think, all right, no, I know it's supposed to be there, but I'm not going to deal with it now. And I don't know how to get that acceptance going in people. How do we get them to move beyond the fear of new technology?
So from my perspective, and I'm sure Terrence and Verona might have a slightly different viewpoint. So from my perspective, it is always a little bit like when you're eating an elephant, it's one small bite at a time. We are not suddenly going to take, let's say, a female business owner or a aspirant entrepreneur or a small business owner that is, having a service or a limited product offering, and introduce massive technology like AI or whatever the case might be, and think they're now just going to run with that. Very often it is small steps, but again, take the step, see where it goes, give yourself the time to try it out, give yourself the permission to say, I failed at this, but hey, there are many people that know how to do this, and the internet is a wonderful thing. You can get lots of resources and information and so on, and there are many people like us that want to assist, that want to help people, to encourage them to consider new technologies, and to consider, how can technology change my business? How can it make it different to what it currently is, and how can it make it different to the guy next to me?
Thank you, Leonie. Terrence, do you agree?
I agree a lot with Leonie, GP. And to add to that, I think what's important is, as much as there's a fear factor, and I'm busy advising a current business in the automotive space, the original solution that they were looking at is, how do we make accounting easier? And they looked at QuickBooks and other platforms, and these solutions are there. They solve the problem. But then I had proposed to them platforms like Zoho, which are enterprise CRM-centric systems that happen to have accounting and everything else built into that. And they had pushed back and said, but all we want to do is track what we make and invoice the client and know where the money went. And I said, but the lifeblood of the business is your customer relationship, your data. of understanding who your client is, where he is, what his needs are, what he buys, how often he bought, how much he spent with you, how do you contact him, be in touch, engage. And that to me is understanding that technology is an enabler to creating these relationships. You can keep it in a little black book and phone them whenever you remember to do so, or put it on a WhatsApp list, which you can do anyway. But being able to understand the data of the client, understand the data of the consumer, is solving not just a current problem, but long-term. Being able to understand what is available in the data and finding the trends that you may not necessarily see. In terms of the courageous approach, very much so, like you have amazing programs that we're developing in Telet and NWU, but you also have shorter, very short, less, if I would call it, intimidating programs you'd find on YouTube, because literally every minute, 500 hours of content is being uploaded to YouTube. So there's always a how to and how to understand how things work and why it's being done. So it's less intimidating. But if you want a sort of more formalized approach, there's platforms like Coursera and edX that offer dedicated short courses on saying, how do I use this and why do I use it, from formalized institutions? Irrelevant of where you get the exposure, it's being able to understand that technology must make your life easier, not make you more frustrated. Because if it does not make your life easier, then you've missed what I spoke about, the internal journey with technology and innovation. Understand what you're trying to improve, how it adds value to what you do, and as an end, as an outcome, how does it make a difference to your clients and the value that you create for them?
Thank you, Terrence. Verona, your perspectives on this? I think more from a training environment as well. I think some people might be watching this and thinking, oh yes, perhaps not, if not for myself, then I know someone